Hey everybody, thanks for listening to the podcast today. I'm working on growing my YouTube channel at Alex Swire-Clark. I would love for you to subscribe to the channel and like any and all videos that provide value to you. All of the podcasts can be found there, as well as lots of different video content on emotional intelligence and how you can apply it to improve your personal and professional relationships. Thanks for subscribing, and now on to the show. What is going on? Alex Swire-Clark here, emotional intelligence expert, author, and award-winning speaker. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to answer the question, should you be funny at work? What are some of the pros? What are some of the cons? And figure out what's the best approach if you're going to be doing that on a daily basis. Stay tuned. Welcome back. If you are new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button and you'll get all of our content as soon as it comes out. Bing, bang, 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 with the bells, ding, 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 and where all that stuff is, wherever it is on the video right now, because I'm not the detail-oriented guy. It's what my editing team does. So today we're discussing humor at work. Should we or shouldn't we? This was as a result of a LinkedIn article that was posted recently that was done and had about 85,000 readers as of this morning, which is June the 10th. And so it was a pretty hot topic, so I wanted to kind of address it from a emotional intelligence point of view. So if you know me and you've been to the channel before, you know we're all about the DISC model of human behavior because it's super easy to understand, super easy to teach, and to be able to apply it to your personal and professional lives. So from that aspect, most of you know, have you been to my channel before, you know that I'm a high I. High I's are outgoing and people-oriented, never met a stranger, talked to a squirrel, super positive, super creative, and we love to make people laugh. That's kind of what we do. But not every style is wired like that. Your high D's are your outgoing and task-oriented. They're more about getting things done. Your S's are people-oriented and reserved. They're not necessarily about making people laugh, but just enjoying being around others. And then you've got your high C's, who are those analytical types, reserved and task-oriented. So they're there at work to get things done and do it in the proper fashion. So not everyone is going to be interested in telling the office party joke or whatever else. You know, those dad jokes that you hear sometimes, like, you know, what do clouds wear? Or why did the scarecrow win an award? Well, because he was outstanding in his field. Right? You know, those silly things. So when is it appropriate to be funny at work, and should you or should you not? So what are the benefits? And this has generated a really nice debate. So I'm going to read you a few of the comments that were made in the article and kind of address those as we go through. So the first one was, I use humor to drive creativity and productivity. I use humor to drive creativity and productivity. That does work to a certain extent, but remember, not every personality style is motivated by the same things. So high I's are certainly motivated by fun. They're all about the journey and enjoying the process. But your high C's, not so much. I mean, they don't necessarily come to work for the relationships, and they're more focused on getting the tasks done, ticking the boxes off throughout the day to make sure they're getting everything done that they need to get done in the right order all the time. So if anything disrupts that, like jokes or parties or those kinds of things, they're just not necessarily is going to be as engaged as some of the other styles, particularly on the right-hand side of the graph, those I's and S's. So for certain people, yes, providing humor and providing fun is going to increase productivity in the workplace, but for others, it might be a hindrance. So be careful of that. Know who you're working with and know who you're serving in those roles and what their personality style is, because that will definitely play a huge role. For example, if I'm talking to a group of accountants, they're just not going to be as enthused. They're not going to be laughing. They're not going to be as joyous and joyful because they're reserved. They kind of play things close to the vest. So in that mindset, that might not necessarily be the best play in terms of getting them motivated and getting them to be more productive. Second comment was, having fun is great, but you have to walk the line of professionalism at work. So having fun is great, but you have to kind of walk the line of professionalism at work. And I tend to agree with that. The folks in my company will tell you that I love to laugh and play games and that kind of stuff. In fact, pretty much every month when we do our team meeting, we're having some kind of fun activity, whether it's a trivia contest, a virtual scavenger hunt, or something like that. You know, we do dress-up contests, lots of things to get people out of their comfort zone and to create a fun type of atmosphere. So that works for me as the high I CEO. That kind of permeates itself through our company. But again, that has to be a huge component of what you're doing on a daily basis, because ultimately we are there to get things done, and we are there to get things done in the appropriate fashion. So it can't just be all play, okay, and no work, and vice versa. It shouldn't necessarily be all work and no play, because that lends itself to a very non-collaborative type of culture. So that's something we have to be mindful of as well. So again, walk that line. Even if you've ever heard me speak, you know that I'm a fun, candy-throwing, crazy guy, but I'll also stop and use dramatic pauses for effect, and really get into the nuts and bolts of why we're there and why something's important. And so fun is great, but for those task-oriented folks, they have to know what's going to happen and why it's going to happen on a daily basis, and not just come in we're going to have another workshop and sing Kumbaya and all that kind of good stuff, because that's not going to engage them as effectively. The third thing I would say is, when you look at where we are right now with our culture, as especially here in the States, is that another person brought up an interesting point of that you have to be mindful of the cancel culture. The cancel culture is real. People who disagree with certain folks, they get canceled out. Their opinion isn't valid, and they just kind of get shoved to the side. And so we have that, across political boundaries right now. We have that across lifestyle boundaries now, and it's all over the place. It's very very persistent in terms of the language we hear, and the articles that are on Twitter and other forms of social media. It's out there pretty consistently. So some of the things that were brought up was, if you're gonna tell jokes, well, number one, is the joke appropriate, right? I mean, does it offend somebody? Does it particularly cast a negative light on a certain group of people or a certain type of person in general? So those things we have to be mindful of. Obviously, we don't want to offend anyone, and there are certain things that some folks find offensive that others don't, obviously, and that's a general debate we've got going on back and forth every day. Is some people say, we're the United States of the offended now, because anyone and everyone's offended by anything and everything. So you almost can't speak anymore. So that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. And the second question that person brought up was, is the joke at someone else's expense? And so that's never appropriate. Anywhere, anytime. We don't want to, make a joke at someone else's expense, unless it is with their consent, or if it's like a roast. You see these celebrity roasts all the time, and of course they know that they're going to be on the spot, and they know that folks are going to come up and talk about them and that kind of thing. And so they're kind of embracing the joke and embracing that mindset. But if I'm talking about Sally down the hall and how she dresses, or Bob in accounting and how he's this stiff who never talks to anybody, and I think he just has something against the world, well, then we're not really not appropriate in any way. And then the third thing is, from a culture standpoint, could you tell that joke based upon where you are? So are you a laid back kind of culture, where kind of anything goes and everybody's there to kind of have fun, and no one takes themselves too seriously, but they take the work seriously? Or is it going to be more of a professional kind of old school throwback? You come to work, suit and tie, be professional at all times, everywhere. We didn't come here to play wastebasket basketball, tournaments during lunch, that kind of thing. So all those things matter. So culture from, your organizational culture versus what you're trying to interject from a personal standpoint, you can have some conflict there sometimes. And so that's something you want to talk to a manager about, or a CEO, or whoever's in charge of, your office culture. Would that be a good fit, and would that be appropriate? And so from my perspective, my key thoughts would be something along the lines of, who's your audience? Who are you talking to? Again, if I'm talking to accountants versus sales folks, the personality styles typically for those two different groups is very different. Your salespeople typically are outgoing, or they're people-oriented at least, depending on if it's outside sales or inside sales and that kind of thing. So that would determine a lot of things. So who are we telling the jokes to? Who's the audience there? And then the second thing was, figure out, right time, right place. Is this the right time to interject that joke? Is this the right setting to tell that joke? Right before the CEO's getting ready to give a motivational speech to the organization, might not be the best time to tell a joke. It may be, because that CEO may be lighthearted and want people laughing and kind of set at ease before things happen. So that kind of gives him or her a chance to ease into their speech very easily. If they're a reserved and task-oriented person, let's say you have a high C CEO who may not be the best at giving speeches, he might want to have someone who's a high D or a high I who's comfortable being outgoing tell a joke or set the audience at ease. That makes his or her job that much easier. So when it comes to humor at work, there's lots of factors that you have to take into consideration. Culture, time and place, the cancel culture that's out there. You would want to be appropriate with the jokes that we tell. I think some of the safest humor is self-deprecating humor. When I'm doing my talks throughout the country and in Canada and so forth, I use a lot of self-deprecating humor about my wife and I in terms of how we get along or don't get along, and what winning looks like for us and not, and those kind of things. So from that situation, self-deprecating humor is fairly safe. Again, you want to talk about yourself personally, not like, me as a Catholic, all Catholics do dot, 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 dot. You don't want to say that. So if you're gifted at it, my advice to you would be to use it. If it comes easy to you, use it. If it doesn't come easy to you and you want to practice it and get better at it, I would encourage you to do so as well. I just was recently at a Disrupt HR event where I was speaking in the upstate of South Carolina. And of course, there's a high I. I've got everybody up and around and people are laughing and whatever. And I kind of kicked off things. I was the leading speaker. And then a couple of speakers after me, someone was talking about benefit. And so he was very dry. But he injected little bit of points of humor about his child and a couple other things along the way that got people chuckling and laughing a little bit. But you can tell that was not something that came easy to him. He was not very demonstrative in how he spoke, but he still reached his audience. So again, stories and humor make any speech better, again, as long as they're appropriate. So if you need coaching on that, you can feel free to reach out to me through YouTube or whatever. All my contact information will be found in the description below. So I'd be happy to talk with you more in depth about this, because humor is a great tool if it's used appropriately in the workplace, in speeches and so forth, but it's got to be used in the right way at the right time in front of the right audience. Appreciate you guys being here. Again, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Would love to have you on board. We're putting out new content every week that's appropriate for you in your personal and professional development. Again, any questions that you have, leave them in the comments below and I'll address those. Thanks for watching. See you next time.